Hey, my name is Ted. Thanks for your patience and thanks for joining us this week. This is the Business of Cyber series, and where we talk about resources for security leaders in critical sectors. There's not enough time, there's not enough people, and there's not enough budget to go around. And what type of challenges that introduces to operational leaders, to security leaders, to overall asset owner journeys in cybersecurity. That's what we talk about here. Today, I'm going to be joined by a good friend. Let me bring him onto the stage. Homero Torres, nice to see you. How are you?
Good morning, Ted. I'm doing well. I want to start off by saying this is a little different for me. It's out of my comfort zone. When we initially spoke about this CS4CA, right? It was like, hey, come on the podcast. We had a fairly good discussion, and then I thought to myself, what does this look like, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be pouring out like my thoughts onto video. I normally do this in what I thought was a safe zone amongst peers, but now here we are having this discussion, which by the way, I'm thankful for, and I appreciate the opportunity. So here we go. I guess let's jump into it.
Let's do it, man. I mean, look, this podcast is dedicated to telling stories, right? And for those of you who don't know, we're going to be talking today about the CISO role yesterday versus today. This is a topic that actually stemmed from a conversation that Homero and I had at CS4CA Houston, where he's in the job market, he's engaged with recruiters, he's engaged with asset owners on a regular basis, has tons of experience from the oil and gas industry as well as the aviation industry. But what we talked about most will stem from a very basic question. Said, hey man, what's the interviewing process right now for CISOs? Like, I have to imagine that every asset owner probably wants something different. And then you just kept talking about all the challenges that you see in that. So we decided to create it into a topic. And on behalf of the community, I'm really glad that you're willing to share that experience, because I think it's a meaningful one.
Sure, and I thought so as well. One of the things you hit on, what's been the experience, right? And the topic is CISO yesterday and today, and my experience. I've been working as a senior leader, not as a CISO titled individual, but when you report up to the board and you're hanging out with the C staff, you're the CISO. And I thought to myself, is this what every company's like? Because if you're down for 8 years, heads down going, you're on a global company, you're all over the world doing things, and then you find yourself out of a job and you're like, okay, now I need to get back into it. Then it becomes what are the conversations like to get into this role 8 years later, right? And that's kind of where my thoughts went. It was like, okay, this is definitely a different kind of job market, but
yeah.
It's interesting, and I know there's a lot of other people that are dealing with this. I have a group of people that we talk to, a lot of other CISOs, other organizations we're a part of, and so it is an interesting time right now for senior leadership.
Very cool. Well, as we jump into a brief agenda, folks that have been part of the show, you know how it is. If you are in the room with us right now and you have a question, you have a comment, you can actually post it on the actual event, and we'll be able to see it. We'll be able to post it on here. We're going to talk about, I'd love to dive into your experience. I'd love to dive into like kind of your journey and how you got here. And then we've got 3 different questions that I'm going to lay out. And it's all about what are organizations looking for? Maybe how has that changed over time? And, really looking forward to the conversation. But before we do, as I flip here to full screen, everybody can go to your LinkedIn. They can check out kind of the companies you work for, but like tell us about the journey from how you evolved in very early roles in security to here.
Sure. So, I mean, I like to go back a little further, and it's a quick thing, right? I know we're limited on time, but I got into this role as an accident. I call it an accident, happy accident, where I happened to be working at Montgomery Ward's. Kind of dates me a little bit, and some of you guys may know what that is, but it was a department store, and I was in electronics. And I got plucked from that group to say, hey, come work with us at Southwest Research Institute as a computer technician back in the early 90s. And so the path started from there. And I wasn't a trained technician. You'd hear about being a technician, understanding what computers did, but I was an engineering major, electrical engineering major. I had experience with computers. I would take them apart. I'd fix them in department stores. So it became an easy transition. And then the people that I interviewed with took a chance on me. they knew, okay, you're not, like I said, you're not a certified technician at the time, whatever that was back then, but they were willing to teach me, and I learned. And then so that's where I started. But along the way, I did network security. I'm an MCSE. Those are the things that we were doing back in the 90s
Right.
that were relevant to the work. And then all of a sudden, I'm found being told that I need a degree, because I actually quit school during that time, because I thought, hey, we're making money. And somewhere along the line, somebody says, you need a degree. And so I stopped everything I was doing, decided to come back to school, work at the actual institution that I left, University of Texas San Antonio, and then started the climbing the ladder there from help desk technician. I think it was my role when I got there. Became a network. They called it network technician there as well, administrator, and then from there, so I jumped into security. So I think the funny thing is, people say, when did you start security? But I think we start from the beginning, because for a lot of practitioners, when you install software, everything from your password creations to patching to configuration, that's security, right? But as a role, I started going into security lately. I was a global security. I'm sorry, global information security administrator, or officer, I should say. And at that point is when things were just a lot different, right? Because the games change. You're dealing with cultures, different time zones. So you're invited to the C-suite conversations and meetings. But this is what I did at a little bit of that to Tesoro, and then a lot of that at SunPower. So, but here we are today. I think 25 years later, I never imagined I'd be thinking about, well, what did and it's not till after you're gone and you're looking back to see what you did.
That's
You're
exactly
like, hey,
right.
I've been doing all these things for the last 8 years. It's pretty. I was a little impressed with myself. Like, I didn't realize we were doing these things, but it wasn't just me, right? It's the people
Yeah.
that my team, a community, people around me. So
Yeah.
it's been a good journey so far.
It is a journey. I read in the New York Times the other day that journey is actually one of the number one most widely used word in the English language now. People use it in school. People use it in medical. People use it all over social media. And so when I was thinking about, what's the difference in a journey and an experience, right? I think experience is you live them. Journeys is when you recognize you're going through this. My journey started in oil field, like steel toe and hard hats, actually on the quality control
I
side,
saw that, yeah.
all the way to cyber. Some people started at Radio Shack, where they were putting stuff together. Cyber became something else. Other people started on a help desk, and they were doing, hi, I need a mouse and a keyboard. And I think that's one of the really interesting components of the CISO role, is that it is such a diverse background of where people are coming from, specifically in critical sectors. But I also think that makes it challenging. I think it makes it challenging because when you take a look at the diversity of the CISO role right now, it's diverse in the who, like all these different people came from different walks of life. But to come, the real challenge is that the asset owners, the C-suite in general, view the CISO role a little bit differently, right? All of them want
Sure.
something different. I mean, that's the real kind of, I wouldn't say the issue, but I think that's what we're thinking of, right? So as I pose this question to you, as we talked in the pre-live, like, what's the state of the job market for CISO? And I can tell you that the attrition rate is high. The conversion rate from interview to actual hiring is lower than we've seen. And I've seen it, I think it's a tough job market in general. What are your thoughts, Homero?
So where we are now, I think, and this is like my experiences, right? And just as of late, and maybe even before, I would say the January of 2023,
Right.
it almost seemed like I would get a recruiter calling me every week to say, hey, we're looking for this individual, and you seem to have that experience and skill set. And now I think I get one call maybe every 2 months
So you're saying calls from recruiters are actually
from
down.
recruiters. are just way down, right? That's
Why?
one. What's that?
I said, I wonder why.
Well, I think the market is changing a bit in that one, you see a lot of people that are out looking for jobs. So if you go to LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these places and you see a posting, a rec goes out, in that first day there'll be like 500 applicants, right? So a ton of people are applying. I think that's one piece of it. The other piece is I think the recruiters are, everybody talks about AI and that kind of stuff, but they're using some type of word search capability algorithm to look for specific things. And I think sometimes it may not, it may be the recruiter doesn't quite understand what they're looking for. A company, I'll give you an example. A company told me, hey, we're looking for a CISO. We came across this is, and I didn't apply for this. Again, they just came across my LinkedIn profile. So we think you're the guy. We want to talk to you. And as we started speaking about the role, I hear the term Okta come out a lot. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, but do you know Okta? I was like, of course I know Okta. We deployed it. Okay, but it became a Okta conversation, but it was a CISO role. So they wanted Okta deployed. They didn't care about anything else I've done, but
Right.
have you deployed Okta for two-factor authentication?
So good and
And
bad.
so,
Like good and bad. Like I think it's good that they have a very specific list of what they're looking for skills. I think that's a good, but don't we think that's a little bit more tactical than a CISO role?
exactly. Right. And that's where I was going. My brain went is who are you trying? Are you trying to hire a uh, product manager, somebody to get this stuff done, or are you bringing in some type of a strategic executive leadership to drive your program? And so, of course, I start going down that path, and it was easily okay. Well, you sound like you're thinking about all these other things. All we want is an Okta person. And the recruiter did call me back and say, look, I don't know what they're looking for. I don't think, I mean, we know they're looking for the Okta person, but we don't know about all these other things, right? Because I started talking about identity management, governance around that, the vision of where you want to drive your IDM program, because that's where I heard them talk about. But at the end, it was like, we just want two-factor authentication deployed. So those are some of the things that I've noticed. But you mentioned something earlier. You said the CISO role is like broad and vast. It's huge, right? Not, I would say there isn't a single. There's multiple things that people look for in a CISO, but there's
Right.
not a single role that's alike. If I'm a leader at an oil and gas company, that's going to be a little different from what I'm doing in fintech,
100%.
right?
100%. I think that's what makes it tough. I
Yeah,
think that's what makes it tough. I think that I think companies, so let's take banking, finance, and healthcare, right?
right,
These are, they're the CISO role, maybe the security office, maybe not the security officer, but the IT director role, the compliance role, these governance roles, privacy roles, all of these, digital protection roles, they're pretty hardened, right? This existing system of how we're managing security, how we're managing our data, it's pretty hardened because you go back 20 years and there's a lot of different regulations that have driven that.
that's right.
You go into the oil and gas industry right now, a pipeline and a rig company and a chemical company all operate totally differently. I mean, they have different. I think you could have the same 5 blue chip stocks in any critical sector. Let's just
Yeah,
say chemical, and what they are looking for in a CISO is totally different. I don't think that that's a good or a bad. I think it's the nature of where we are as an industry. I think the industry is trying to figure out how are we going to manage cybersecurity, how we're going to continue to pay for it, and what's the right skill set for us to manage that. I see some folks that want kind of a financial leader and they just want that person to manage projects. I've seen other people who want a very deep operational experience where they actually want that person understanding how the rigs work and how the relationships between the rigs and the operators work, how the different, network segmentation and layered networks and different operating systems and zones and conduits within a facility or a shop floor is different.
yeah,
I see some people that don't give any power to the CISO, and it's just like kind of a compliance role.
yeah. And funny you say that. Absolutely right. Financial tech, health, you've seen a lot of drivers through compliance, right? You will have this person in place. They will be reporting, even some of the stuff now with the SEC that we see coming out. There are certain things that you do as a CISO or the senior leader of security that is warranted by the main nature of the business. I think bottom line, it's the maturity of the industry is one, as what we're hitting on, but the other one is also the maturity of the organization, right? So if a lot of times the organization, you see a lot of them say, look, I just want somebody to come in because I was told I need a CISO, right? I need somebody in name, and I have these things that need to get done, right? Because an auditor came through and said, these are your hotspots. And I don't disagree with those things. Again, it just depends on what that business is looking for at that particular moment in time. And then that's an evolution, right? You start moving up that evolution chain of you're actually not a tactical person, but you start becoming a little more strategic, where you're working through M&A, you're working through cyber insurance. And I think cyber insurance is another thing people are talking about or thinking about, because when you're saying I'm going to go spend X amount of dollars on a CISO,
Right.
I have cyber insurance, my CIO and team are managing that. Like, I think it's sometimes it offsets that cost and say it's okay if in other words, my liability, they're willing to take that risk because I have cyber insurance. Now, I think that may be I don't agree with that. Let's put it that way. I think there's a lot more complexities around what insurance looks like, and we're not here to talk about cyber insurance, but all these things are components when organizations are trying to figure out, well, what do I want to hire? What do I want to bring into the organization? Tactical.
Yep. I think it's a good, I think we're going through like this cycle, and that cycle is that there's a lot of options out there for security for critical sectors. So we take a look at $1.1 billion deployed in 2021 on all these different product companies, which is too much capital that got deployed at that time. A lot of those companies try to scale as if they were like a traditional IT or a traditional tech company, and critical sectors don't buy like that. They don't move like that. They don't move that fast. The sales cycles are longer. Greenfield versus brownfield. I mean, you're not just connecting cybersecurity to users, right? You're not just connecting it to a number of companies. So I think that was a miss, right? Simultaneously, you got the cyber insurance market that is just kind of a mess right now. I think that there are, it's hard to get coverage. It's hard to get it underwritten. All the different brokers are using a different sort of model, whether that's a controls model or a risk model or a threat model. And so there's not a lot of semblance of order there. And then you got the people problem. The people problem is there's just not enough qualified folks, and everybody knows it. Then when you put all these things together, I think it's a real challenge. So what do we want the CISO role to be? I know companies, I talked to a CISO the other day that said, I just moved to this company 5 months ago and they're finally open to insurance. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, I was with another asset owner that didn't want to have anything to do with cyber insurance. I said, how are you pitching it differently? He says, well, we're looking at this as just one of our mitigation strategies, one of our risk reduction methodologies, one of the ways that we're saving money and financing potential downtime. So, what advice? Well, let me ask you this. How are the recruiters right now? You mentioned earlier that you used to get calls every single week. My gut tells me the reason you don't get as many calls, or the industry's not getting enough calls, there's so many people flooding into these CISO roles. They just need to stop. They need to sift through all these resumes. Do the recruiters have a real understanding of what a CISO role should be? Are they good guides out there? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are. I've spoken to several, and the interesting part is when they don't know you and they're engaging you and they're trying to figure out who you are and are you the right fit for the role? Because I mean, they're trying to fill a seat, right? That's their business. I'm gonna bring talent to this organization. I get paid for that. Blah blah blah. Right? Okay. But then when you start really getting into the discussion, you get one interview in, kind of like a discovery type of interview, who you are. They start realizing that, hey, either you're not a fit or the company's looking for something different. Now, I've heard two different things from recruiters. Some of the recruiters are hell bent on, this is what they want, this is what I'm going to get. Right. The other one is, hey, let me talk to them because I think this would be a better move for them if they do it this way.
Right.
And so they seem to have an understanding. Say that again?
They're guiding the process well.
Yeah, they are. A lot of them are. And then you'll find some that are somebody will send me a message saying, "Hey, do you want to be vulnerability? Like, you want to run a vulnerability scanner for this company?" And I'm like, "Did you read my?" Not that I wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah,
I
but
think,
that's the problem. So I think, and I'm not for or against recruiters or any sort of role. I just think that everybody is out to, everybody has their own incentive, their own plan. And I get it all the time. My inbox is flooded with roles that don't fit. And I think people just, if you're going to work for recruiters, I think it's very important to understand what their experience is in placing and what their core belief system is. You
sure,
just mentioned something I think the recruiter has to do, and that is, hey, help me understand what your goal is, candidate. Okay, well, I think I'm going to go back and tell them that you match the intent, you match the ethos they're looking for.
yeah,
I had this
exactly.
happen. One time I had a recruiter that I was using. Well, actually, let me think here. I wasn't using her. I had already had 3 candidates for a role, and I was pretty much down to 2 of them. And I was about to make a hire. And she called me. She says, "Ted, you have to listen to me." And I said, "What's up?" She goes, "Listen, this candidate came across my desk. You absolutely have to meet this individual because I'm telling you, what you're looking for looks a little different." And ended up listening to her. I took the call. I swapped the other 2 candidates that I had originally had off the table. I hired the guy the next week.
Wow.
That's the recruiter actually understanding what my vision was.
Yeah.
And it seems like, we just had a comment on one of the threads here. I think the industries are not leveraging recruiters, want the tech side only, and so they rely on LinkedIn. He says the ones that are looking for leadership first are the ones that are looking for recruiters and headhunters. And I tend to agree. If you're going to
Yeah.
invest in a recruiter as an asset owner, I believe that you have to, if you really want to be well positioned as a CISO, you have to go through a really savvy recruiter, because that recruiter's job is to find the right person, not so much the right skill set. Your thoughts?
So I think some of the better recruiters, they're more mature. I'll put it that way. They've been through this, right? So they understand one side of it. In other words, they understand what the CISO is and does and their work, and then they understand what the organization is looking for. And like, to your point, if they understand the vision of what you're trying to go to, where do you want to be in the future, these guys are able, the good ones are able to look at that and say, "Hey, I know this other person checks all those boxes of the type of person you need, but this other individual has vision. This one, I'll give you one of my own stories. Charlie Runyon, he used to work for me at SunPower. Now, if I looked at his resume, everything on his resume said Navy diver. Okay, he was a naval guy. He was a diver for certain years. He was a project manager in IT. That's probably why I got on our radar. And it was and so I had a good friend, to your point, a recruiter, call me up and say, "You need to talk to this guy." And when I looked at his resume, I thought, he understands risk. He must. He's a Navy construction diver, so he's under the water. He has to understand. He works with a team. So in other words, I was looking at all those little pieces, but then he also had an education background in cyber, right?
Mm.
Because the military was funding his
Right.
degrees. So all of a
Is it
sudden,
the right
the
person?
reason, yeah. So when my buddy called me up and said, "You should look at this guy," the first thing I thought is, okay, his initial job was or his initial career was in the military, Navy. I like that because of structure, that kind of thing. But he transformed that into in cybersecurity. But he understood risk, right,
Right.
and the pressure. So those are the things that, if you think about it, a recruiter and a word search algorithm would look for a guy that has a CISSP, or I think lately it's more Security Plus, which I thought was interesting. That's another story. But they're like, "Hey, you have a Security Plus, I have a CISSP." It's like, "Oh, well, really, we're looking for a Security Plus guy," right? That's like one of the first starts. Nothing against that, but
Right.
when you see the word search look for that and he doesn't have it, how do you figure out who these people are? And it goes back to the talent, right? Because that's
Right.
a talented individual. And
Well, I
so,
think that it's tough. Like, so what do you think makes people in the CISO that are searching for a CISO role, candidates, what do you
mhm.
think makes those candidates stand out in today's job search? Couple points. Like, if there was one thing you put at the top of the resume, or the first thing that you said to a recruiter, What do
I
you
think
think that is today?
for if are you asking if you were looking to fill a CISO role?
Yeah. So if I'm the recruiter and I say, "Hey, Homero, nice to talk to you. Let's take 20 minutes. Tell me about yourself. I'm representing a Fortune 1,000 company in the oil and
Sure.
gas market." How
So
do
so
you?
I would look at myself and say what value do I bring
Hmm.
as an executive leader? And a lot of it is understanding business enablement. Like everybody will say, "What do you do?" And you're like, "Well, I do security." And I think I go a little bit further. I go, "So you know what? My role is a cybersecurity professional, but my my talent really and my value is bringing value to the company through driving down risk on the cyber side, right? And it's enabling the business to do what they need to do. So, but doing it in a secure fashion. So my talent is one, being able to come in and drive value through what we can do to secure your movement, whether it's an M&A, whether it's you're going to a new market, whether you're you're doing new products online, cloud strategy, whatever that is. That's where I think you want to look for somebody that's done that before, has that experience, and understands some of the technical
So,
background.
so, so right there, I think that separates. That's a line. It's a line that is
Yeah,
drawn, and here's the line that I think it is. You, in your first couple minutes, talking to the recruiter or talking in the interview, have talked about business outcomes. You've talked about business. Where do you want to take this business? What's your goal for the next 36 months? You're operating from a core leadership perspective, and then, well, how does security play into that? I'm not putting
right.
words in your mouth. I'm just saying that's where you would drive, right?
It
If
is.
they answer that, I would say that somebody with your experience or with your acumen, just walk. Because for me, if the recruiter can answer one very particular question with authenticity, quickly, and with poise, and it is, hey, what is the strategic initiative of the CISO role to support some business outcome? If they can't say right then and there, hey, we're looking at acquiring 6 new businesses over the course of the next 5 years. We need to have a scalable cloud-oriented data model. Okay, we have experienced non-productive time exceeding our planned levels, and we really want this CISO role to tie into safety and tie in that. So I don't think asset owners do a tight enough job of that statement. And as a result, they just say, we need to find a CISO. Here are all the things that we need on there. And that's why I think the recruiters, or in general, just the hiring managers, I'm not saying it's making it tougher. I'm just saying that is what I think is the path to a great hire.
I would agree with that. I think some of it is, or like people that are hiring not quite understanding what the role is, and I've heard it before during the interview process, where I hear the hiring manager say, "Wow, I didn't even think about that part of the job."
Right,
Right?
right.
And look, I mean, again, there's so much. It's such a vast amount of responsibility that can be put on the CISO. Again, every organization is different, right? So you have some teams that offset some of their operations. You have people that do, governance differently, assurance. So it really depends. But a lot of times, I think their vision, like you said, if the vision isn't there, it's very more tactical. If I just got to get these things done, that's a different kind of role, right? And so it's a
We got a
mechanical.
question here. How do you get past the applying to the job black hole, which I'm confident means you apply to a bunch of different roles and then they don't respond to you, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think my experience has been this connections. Like when I go to the CS4CA, right? That conference, I got 4 people talking to me about a role, and all of a sudden now I'm actually talking about employment, like gaining employment, or getting a customer, right? Because I see that I've done so much work. They're like, hey, can you give us some advice on this, right? The black hole comes into I'm applying, I'm going into the system. The system is churning out by word search or whatever. They spit out some like 30 or 40 resumes and somebody has to look at it, right? So the biggest thing is to avoid that black hole is use your connections, right? Things like what I'm doing today with
Yeah,
you, right?
sure.
Talking to your
Conference
network.
speaking, going to network events. I mean, look,
Exactly. Yeah.
I haven't always said, but I think authenticity is the new currency, right? I think
Yeah.
that with AI, ChatGPT, Recruiter. There's just so many ways where you could make a resume pop. But at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to the first or second conversation that you have with folks. And I'm finding just in business in general that the vast amount of there's a positive correlation with the investment you make in your ecosystem, asking for nothing, and then how that will reward you back. And I don't know. It begs a different question. How long do you think the average CISO is searching for a role that he or she really is excited about? Is this, months long, or is it longer than that? And what advice would you give to somebody considering jumping into this cold water?
I think it's months long. Like today, it's months long. 2 years ago, a little different, right? I'm starting to see more recs come out. I'm starting to see more like activity.
Right.
I don't know what the driver is. I think maybe the market. They feel like maybe they're going to be able to spend a little more money. You're also starting to see. It's funny. I had a friend call me. Goes, you see what happened to I forgot what the medical group was, but their business was disrupted, right?
Well,
and so you see that kind of stuff happening, and I think people are working. Can I go without a CISO? Can I use what I'm doing right now? And a lot of it is smaller companies, right? Or even investing in other personnel, like growing my team. And when those things happen, immediately you have like we got to open a rec and get somebody in there to help us out, or they go talk to someone.
I got CISOs in my network right now that there are security projects ongoing. There are investments at the facilities, and these CISOs are not a part of that decision-making process. I find that challenging. I see other CISO roles where there is so much put on the plate. Hey, I want you to connect with digital. Hey, I want you to connect with safety. Hey, I want you to connect with all these IT functions. Hey, I want you to do OT. But then they don't give them the people to actually manage the projects. And so then these folks end up walking away earlier than they probably anticipated from that job to just go find another one because they just didn't have the resources to get it done.
Yeah.
I think
one of my experience, my same company, it's an evolution of the company over 8 years. I get there and they're like, spend all this money, grow your team. All right, growing it. And then next thing you know, we need to cut back. Right. So they're pulling money, right? But it all really depends on where that company's at. And the one thing I find is there's a relationship that needs to be built from a CISO to infrastructure, CISO to the OT folks and leadership in those groups. And a lot of times what happens is you'll say, we have a project, go get it done. And the OT folks are like, hey, we're busy. Like, there's no downtime here. We can't make it. Okay, fine. Right. Products team, same thing. I got an increment that I'm planning for. You need to get into our next increment plan, which is in 2 months, right? And so it's very important that the individual that comes in as CISO or as a CISO that's there builds those relationships and shows them how you can bring value, right? A lot of times I would say, hey, you know what? I know you're trying to do this, and like you said earlier, they're building this project, but there's nobody in security is involved, so there's going to be some technical debt there. It always is, right? So it becomes how do I manage that? How to bring value at the outset versus waiting to go down the line to say, hey, you did something wrong. Like becoming part of the team and bringing a solution is probably the best thing to do.
I work in the world of helping organizations move from this level to this level to this level in maturity, maybe sometimes compliance. But I'm in the business of helping folks transition to the next phase. So one of the questions that I often ask when I'm starting a conversation is, hey, where are you at in your journey? Where are you at in your cyber journey? You just starting off, you just getting budget, you're doing your first couple assessments, understanding where, baselining things. Or are you looking to digitize everything? Are you looking at, there's a bunch of different questions, but what I'm really trying to understand is how easily and well can the individual articulate where they are, where they want to be, and do they understand the gaps to get there? That's my business, okay? Asset owners very rarely, I think, can do that. So the CISO role is the one that has to actually speak that language. And I don't find CISOs doing that often enough. I think it is a gap in the industry. I don't think CISO standing up and saying. Do you agree?
I agree and I disagree. I think let me tell you why I disagree a bit.
Send it.
Um, it's not necessarily that what you're saying isn't true. It becomes there's the complexities are a little higher than that, right? It becomes a who do you report to? So I'll give you, and you're going to have competing agendas, right? So for example, let's say we find that we need to revamp. We find all of these vulnerabilities. We revamp this, and that the solution is not patching because it's funny because people say, "Well, just patch it." Well, no, I think your architecture is off. You need to re-architect what you have. That means either upgrade, rip and replacing part of it, upgrading it. Those are challenges that organizations will see, but it becomes a. I think the CISO isn't having the right conversations with the leadership. And I think that's why I say I agree to what you're saying, but it's a little more complex. So, in other words,
Right.
we need to talk about what's the liability to the organization, what's the risk, and this goes back to the comment that was made earlier of you're now an administrator, you're running a business, right? And so, how do I manage and run the business, drive down the risk, and continue moving that needle, right? And so, a lot of times it becomes again building that relationship, working with the team, figure out what that looks like. Because if you have a competing agenda, it's always it's always me first, right? I'm going to take care of me, and
Yeah.
and if I can get past it, and maybe this never happens. It's like insurance, right? You're like, I don't need insurance for my car, right?
Until you
Nothing's
need
going
it.
to happen until you need it, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of people operate that way. They really do.
Yeah, I tend to understand. Well, what are people looking for in these interviews? I mean, what's the average interview like right now? Who's it with? How's it going? What are you finding in interviews today that maybe you'd share with the audience are not maybe even what you expected, and maybe how have they changed in the last couple of years?
Um, I don't think they've changed a whole lot. I think that there. I did notice a couple of differences though. Initially, they talk to you about products, right? And this is going back 8, 10 years ago. Do you understand these products? Can you deliver them, right? And today, like back then, it was next gen firewall,
Hmm.
right? Today, it's CrowdStrike or XDR, EDR, or SOAR components, right? But the bigger piece, again, it all depends on what kind of interview you get. You can get the tactical, hey, can you deliver this? Or it becomes a strategically speaking, how do you handle the board?
Hmm.
Have you reported to the board? How do you deal with um, cyber insurance? I haven't heard a whole lot about cyber insurance, maybe one. I was on an interview panel. I had 4 interviews actually with a company out of Houston, and then everything just stopped. Right. So that was a little weird. Like I went through the entire process, but they're looking. What I noticed is they're looking for somebody that understands compliance, governance, in that aspect. But again, everybody's a little different. But the expectation now is, do you have certain certifications behind you? I've run into pen testing where they say, hey, can you pen test? Do you know how to pen test? Can you write code? Which was interesting for me because it was like, is this a CISO position or do you want me to be a security engineer? Like I didn't realize what it was. So it's all over the place. But for the most part, I think the last interview I had, somebody asked me what kind of book what are you a book reading? What did you read? And can you tell me what you liked or disliked about the book? I thought it kind of threw me for a loop a bit. You used to have the Amazon folks and others that would give you a puzzle, right, and figure this out.
Yeah,
But I think those are just like, hey, are you human, right? What do you
sure.
bring to the table from the human side, the
Well, I think
soft
that
skills?
you bring up a good point. I mean, there's all these things. I think a company that you're interviewing with, I find the CISOs that are the most successful in my line of work are working for a company that has a clear vision of what they want that CISO to be and do. Is it the digitization strategy? Is it non-productive time? They have a business goal. And the CISOs will also translate that to security. I think I'm not interviewing for these roles, but if I was, I would say, hey, look, what does success look like in 12 to 18 months? And I think you can really turn the tables on the, maybe not on the interview, but in the process. And, you know, folks with your level of experience, folks that are capable of being CISO, I think should be very cognizant and almost careful of where they're about to step, because they're going to carry the capability of them doing a good job, I think, is positively correlated with the resources they're going to get and the support they're going to get. And I think that right now I'm 50-50. Some CISO roles, they're just there kind of as a placeholder, and then the other 50 are overworked because there's just so much to do. Do you find that kind of difference in the hiring roles? Can you tell?
I can tell. Now? Yeah, you can tell. So one of the things I like to ask is, what does your org structure look like? What's your reporting structure look like? A question I started asking about is, if you're going for a CISO role or a director role, are you covered by their, what is it called, director and officer?
Director and officers is DNO.
Right, DNO. And I think most of the people I've asked that, they're like, they like, why would you need that, right? Because that tells you a little bit about
strategically about the role,
right? Or they don't quite understand, because I find it interesting. My last role, they're like, here, Homero, sign this, right? Read through it. If you agree, make changes, whatever you need to do. And it was something like, you know, if you think about what Tim Brown and SolarWinds, it was a quarterly report of, has there been any changes? What have you seen? And so something as simple as that, I started asking myself the question, if I'm signing this, then am I the top guy here, that like I'm putting my name on this for and filing this with the SEC, right? So when you start asking questions like that, is who's, you know, the question is, who's the senior most leader of cybersecurity here at this organization? And some people say, well, hey, that's why we're bringing you in. And others, and most of it I hear is, it's like, well, it's me, the CIO, right? It's like, okay, so you're ultimately responsible for these things, right? So that also gives you an idea of where they're thinking about who runs the show. And again, it's to me, I see it as a partnership with leadership, CTO, whoever that is, because they do what they do, I do what I do, right? But we're in it together to drive the business. But I think those are the things that I see, that when you start asking those questions, it gives you an idea of who they are. Or the other piece of it is, we're not there yet. I just want you to come in and do this. But then I also see that as an opportunity to showcase, okay, this is what this could really be.
Well, I think everybody wants a challenge, right?
Yeah.
I think, you know, you got a list of the things that you want. Not always going to get them all, but is the company and the people there worth the experience, right? Can I take them to the next level? And I think to me, I think that the CISO role, I had a conversation with a senior security leader last week on the show, and I asked him a very basic question. I said, what's the one skill set you want on all of your hires, right? And his answer was really interesting. I think his answer was that he wanted some element of curiosity, right? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to change? Are they willing to adapt?
Sure.
Adaptability, curiosity, you know, vigor, grit. These are things that I think the CISO role and his or her team have to have these days. And I feel that the industry is still focused on, you know, what certifications do you have? Do you have every one of these certs? You know, these are people that are looking for mid-tier roles that are being asked to have 30 years worth of experience. I mean, there's a big mismatch. We didn't get to talk about that today, but no,
there is, and I'll give you one where a recruiter, Manny Morisore, I do some advisory work for Digis, right, with those guys. And he sent me something, goes, can you look at this? I'm like, okay. Somebody sent me this. They want somebody with, I think it was at least 5 years experience, blah, blah, blah. So they start going all this, but they say they must have like a CISSP, or 3 years experience, must have a CISSP, right? CISA, but, you know, and I'm like, well, you should match those up, because if you're a CISSP, you have to have a certain amount of experience. So you'll see some of these things where they're just throwing stuff out.
Yeah,
it is, and that's you know, and of course, when you have to go back to them and say, hey, by the way, some of them will like it and say, yeah, you're right, we'll change that. Others will be like, oh well, they kind of start ghosting you, don't talk to you anymore, because you're like,
yeah,
okay,
It's a circular equation, because if you make the job application not tight enough, you get too many of them. You make it too tight, you don't get enough. I think that the recruiter is very important in this phase.
It is.
Well, we're at time, but I do appreciate you coming on and giving your personal story. I mean, what I'm taking from this is recruiters are important. Knowing exactly what kind of organization you want to work for is important. And you just got to sort of play the long game here, finding the right role. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned earlier about what if you're getting into the market or you're out there looking. I think a lot of it is take the roles. I think there, like you said, there isn't a perfect role, but understand what you're getting yourself into. There's certain level of maturity. Those are things you look for. But at the end of the day, it's like you bringing value to the organization, right? And I used to always say, where there's chaos, there's opportunity, right? So if somebody go, hey, that's a dumpster fire, then don't go there. And my thought is, I need to go check those guys out.
Yeah.
because I'm like, what can I do?
Chaos. They all the data points that are flowing. They see patterns. They see opportunities. Other people run from it. That's what makes it.
And those are great, right? Where you can go out there and create relationships, build something, and those are the things you're looking for. And I think, again, looking back at what I've done before in the past, Joel Abram, I think he was on the call, and he ends up telling me this. The first thing he's been, manage your network. You're out of a job, but you have a community like yourself as well, where you're reaching out to folks and they're letting you know things are okay. They're helping drive your skill set, but it becomes tell people where you become valuable. Don't just tell them that you have an education. Don't just tell them you have a cert, but talk about the things that you did to deliver, right? What are you doing for the organization, right? And that's a transformation piece that I think people don't quite understand yet, but that's where I like to be at.
Very cool. Well, we've got a lot of comments from folks giving great feedback. Thank you for your attendance today. Homero, thanks for the story. I think most people are out there trying to figure out where their next role is. And we've talked just about the CISO role, but this could be applied downstream to any IT or OT director role. Really, really great to have you on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a part of the Business of Cyber Show, where we talk about resources for security professionals within the critical sectors. Join us next Tuesday. We've got a great topic coming up. More to follow. Let's go make it a great week, folks. Thanks.
Adios. Thank you. Good.
And we are in.